Sunday fun day. Welcome back to the Ram Revival. So, Gantry crane will hopefully earn some of its keep here by dropping the 408 in the truck. But a couple of holdups. Number one, I think my nephew is really wanting to kind of be a part of this one, so I'm trying to see if I can schedule him to get over here. Number two, it would be nice because I've never moved the gantry with a load. We're not going far. What I will do, there's not a huge distance. I mean, we're like 2 engine stands away from the grill guard on the truck, so I will clear the cherry picker out, shop vac. Probably gonna have to move the frickin' punching bag stand again, which it's really hard to move things when there's no space. So that's kind of an obstacle. The cart's gonna have to go. The punching bag's over there for movement convenience. It's just, I don't know, I'm out of space in here, so it severely complicates things, because otherwise we would just roll the engine forward, roll the gantry crane forward, pick it up kind of right in front of the truck, and then if I have people here, I would basically have someone on this side and someone on that side of the gantry, and we would just slowly work it, and I guess I would be in the middle, get the engine raised up, try to limit, you know, the back and forth pendulum action as we travel forward towards the truck, and call it good. I mean, once it gets in position, you're kind of home free. So I mean, I'll make it as safe and as small of a distance as possible to travel that I can. But that's the game plan there. Again, it's kind of hard to record, you know, when you got like 3 other people in here. So something I did last night afterwards, I put the freeze plugs in. Again, we've got one, this would be on the passenger side of the block, and 2 are going to be on the driver's side of the block, sort of right above my finger. Other thing, I don't think I filmed it, I went ahead, I pulled off the throttle body. I have got the engine lift plate in place. With the throttle body gone, you can kind of see the funkiness that is that crossover. It's just a deal, it's very, very subtle, but this rail, I think it's this rail, extends a little farther back, and then it sits at a slightly higher incline. So very strange. That text could be the news we were waiting on. The other thing that's very important that I don't want to forget is right there, and if you think that looks like a socket, it is. That is the oil pressure sensor. I don't quite recall how difficult it is to access this. Going to the Hughes air gap, it's going to be a lot easier than the kegger. The kegger just, none of this existed. You know, if you're at the front, you couldn't see anything back here, distributor included. So with the distributor in, I'm going to leave it in. I'm going to attempt to leave everything in. I feel like it would take the brunt of a hit before we would break the sensor off. I do not have a spare at this point in time. So I might just even leave the socket. I'm not sure. Hopefully I'll remember to get it. But I cannot find a torque spec on that. And if you note the white contrasting the black, I don't know if Teflon's the appropriate sealant there, but any time in my past messing with old cars, when I've had anything with an oil fitting or, you know, brass that has oil involved, I've always used Teflon, so that's what I'm doing here. The big thing, this is a zero non-issue if you are running, you know, like dropping this Magnum in an old car and going to put a carb on it or anything. But if you're keeping the factory fuel injection, or even, you know, going to run an aftermarket, these 2 bosses here, drilled and tapped, I realize that's sort of hard for you to see. I think that's actually the better angle. Not in the head, I'm not talking about those 2, I'm talking about these 2. That is going to hold the crank position sensor, right? So you've got your little flywheel here, and that's where your sensors are going to come down, dang near touch the flywheel, right? So that's a sensor that's like very, very difficult to access when it's in the truck. It's easy to access here. The catch is when you go to like put this in, you could potentially damage it. Now, if we come back over here, this is our big gulp. Probably need to take a look at that beautiful thing, because again, once it's in the truck, it'll be really hard to see. But this box, I think this one, this is a new old stock Mopar 5602-7870-001. If I open her up, you will soon see. Come on, one hand, there we go. So this is the bracket, that is the sensor, and this is the plug, right? So if we come back over here, you can kind of see the setup, right? It's going to tuck in like so, mount up just like that. The reason I'm filming this and not just having it installed like, you know, everything else that we've covered so far is twofold. You know, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and throw that sucker on so I have it done and I don't forget to do it. And, you know, if I start having trouble with clearance issues, then maybe I'll tackle it type of a thing, right? I grabbed from this miscellaneous Magnum bolt box these two guys here, you know, and I thought like, oh yeah, you know, I'll just clean those suckers up, obviously. And I like that there's, you know, kind of the integrated washer, and I thought that'll clamp down nicely. If you note, that's like riding the head. And also, if you note, like the head sort of extends over the block here. And the Magnum heads, I don't believe did that. And lucky for us, we've got the 5.2. So we're going to toss that guy in. It's not here. That's the 440. But if I can reach over the extension cord, see how like all of this is exposed? Like there's no bell housing here, you know, this is the back of the block, and so like the heads stop there. The Edelbrock heads like come out to here. And this may be a problem that I was not aware that we would be having until now. So you can see the bracket right there. Oh, battery hold down. You can see the bracket right there. And I don't know if that's gonna clear, and I don't know what we do if it doesn't. Like I would have to be hogging out a big chunk of aluminum on those things. So I would think that was something that you would check, you know, in like the casting process before you actually commit to anything, you know, prototyping, and hey, you know, real world it works too. So that's kind of a concern, I'm not gonna lie. But what I'm gonna do is try to crack that off, and I think I may just clean it up and use that sensor. I wanted to keep this as intact as possible. We've harvested the distributor, a couple other items, some of the bolts that we'd have to, you know, re-procure and everything, but I think that may be the best way to attempt to cover this. Plus then if I do break that in a freak accident, I have a brand new one and I can just attempt to install it. So I have to pick that up. I think it came off that edge of the box. But coming back, you can kind of see what I'm talking about, right? Like, see this angle? It's so hard to see with that shiny finish. But like, watch my finger. This is the edge of the head, and then I disappear like this whole first knuckle. My fingernail goes in because the head just extends over the block that much. Again, if you're swapping this into an A, B, or E body and you've got a carburetor or maybe even aftermarket, which none of the stuff I have I don't think uses a crank sensor, but if you're doing something fancy and you need a crank sensor, this is perfect for you. It's already, this is something the Magnum has that an LA would not have, giving you a head start. You know, it easily positions, mounts, reads your flywheel great, but you know, just that little distance here, we've got a situation where, oh no, can we get a bolt to fasten? So that's going to be the issue. Let's check the front while I'm thinking about this. Same thing, like you can see here, like look at that gap there. You know, like the head just extends way over. So yikes. We'll have to check this out again. Right here, this is not, you know, a Magnum. This is an old school LA, but see how the head is like flush with the block, you know? Like you could putty that up and seam seal it and try to make people think it is one piece if you wanted to. Same thing back here. And again, this is just info for you regular folk, but like the Magnum is exactly the same. You have all the access to this area here. You wouldn't need any of it per se, aside from, of course, the crank position sensor. So again, if you're taking an old school LA engine and you needed to convert to some fancy fuel injection with a CPS, and this is how you pick to get it off of the flywheel, can't do it here unless you heavily modify things, but on a Magnum block, the provision is already there. The problem is the Eddy heads come out all the way. So therein lies our problem, folks. But I think I might just even pull one bolt out and see if that will clear. If that doesn't, I'm probably going to have to get like socket cap screws, you know, like a set screw type of a thing. And I don't know that I'm going to have those, unfortunately, but I guess I'm gonna get to it and see what happens. Also check these techs, but yeah, a little precursor here, kind of boring, but also very important. And again, if you put Eddy heads on your Magnum, this could be an issue for you. Who knows, it might bolt right up. But I wanted to cover freeze plugs oil sensor, and then CPS. So those were very important things. And then, like I said, it's kind of hard for me to film. I'll try to get some of it. But hopefully the next time you hear from me, we either give you a good update there, and B, we hopefully have this in there, which will be awesome. So stay tuned for that. It's a hero of the hour right there. SK 12-inch extension and a 1/2-inch socket. Extracted this guy. And boy, I'm telling you, that is a tight fit. We also just... Okay. I'm trying to make this thing keeps rubbing. And that's not good. I'm thinking it might be the washer. Man, I don't think we're gonna fit a socket over that. Now, luckily, that's got a built-in, Allen provision. So I took it off with an impact socket. Let me see. I'm gonna grab this little Wera 1/2-inch. Yeah, that ain't gonna happen. There's zero. I mean, there's some, but I mean, there's not enough clearance for a thin-walled socket to get around that. So let me see what kind of ball end we need. A couple things I want to point out. I am an advocate. I tell people, if they're just starting or upgrading their tools and they want, they've got impact rated stuff, whether it's pneumatic or electric, whatever. I'll tell you, if you're always on a budget, buy your impact sockets, because you can use those on an impact and you can use them on hand tools, right? There's zero issues. The downside to that is situations like this. An impact socket has no chance of fitting this bolt because of the clearance around it. Now, this won't fit a standard socket. If we had specialty thin sockets, there's also not enough clearance for those. I don't own any. I might have one, but I don't have, it's not going to fit here is what I'm getting at. So that is the one downside, like if you go impact first, this would be rare situations. You probably will run into some before you get your, thin-walled or traditional walled chrome sockets. But this is one of the real-world issues. The other thing is kind of a cool perk. I had an issue building a stool not long ago where this Wera hex key that's got the sleeve on it, since it has that sleeve, I could not get the business end, the ball end, to tuck into the confines to tighten the fastener, whereas just a standard hex key without this sleeve fits just fine. So little things, and I do mean little things, sometimes become an issue. Now that said, in this situation, with that being an aluminum finish, I kind of like, it's nice to have the sleeve, because then if you happen to drag against it, you're less likely to mangle things. But I want to go ahead and see if we can get this all the way down. There's periods where it feels like it's rubbing, and I don't know if that's the washer. Like the washer's in a fixed position now, so maybe it was. But I've got that pretty well bottomed out. I know that's a little too zoomed in for you, but the factory, thank the Lord, I don't know why they did it, because on the Magnum, with factory Magnum heads, you can get a socket, you can get an impact socket, you could have a party in there, okay? With this, the Eddy head coming over the block like it does, you will have to use a hex key. What size is this? It's the Wera Seafoam, so it is 1/4 inch. So the way we removed it was with this conveniently labeled Tecton 1/2-inch drive socket, right? But that's a moot point here because there's no clearance. It is the 1/4 hex key that we need to tighten that down. Now, I hate pulling parts off that 5.2. I always say this because it's a functional engine. Just needs freeze plugs and a water pump. In this case, I'm going to do it because I would have to purchase these. I was actually going to wind up with like the little socket cap, traditional like kind of splines on the side where you can turn them by hand. And this is going to be better. I like that the washer's there as well. So crisis averted. That said, another crisis. I've got fish in the oven, so I've got to run inside and get some macaroni going. But yeah, this is what we'll need. I'll come back and I will extract the other one and the sensor from the 5.2, and at that point in time I will try to get the dimensions on this bolt, so in the event that you don't have one, and for me in the future, we can attempt to order one. Stuff like this though, that you've got a traditional hex head plus the ability to turn it with a socket cap screw, you're kind of crossing into specialty stuff. You're not likely to walk into Home Depot, Ace, Lowe's, whatever, and find that. It's something that you're going to have to probably dig around for, hit up a mom and pop place, go online. It's just fasteners like that. For whatever reason, they don't stock them. So it would kind of be cool if bolts came like that all the time, but I guess the cost would go up significantly. But anyway, I'm going to quit rambling. I don't want to start a fire, and we will be back to check some things out. All right, so lunch was fantastic, then a bad storm came. I'm thinking help isn't going to be able to arrive. I believe with Gantry I could probably stab this thing in myself. It would be a pain, it'd be nice to have, help, but it's kind of important to my nephew, I think he kind of, is like interested in seeing how it goes back in, and being a part of it, so think I'm going to postpone it, but we've got our own crisis here because I've extracted the other bolt for our crank position sensor, dropped it, it fell onto the leg press of a weight machine, blended in perfectly. I lost about 20 minutes as I vacuumed and swept and run magnets around trying to find it. Then I went over to the bench grinder, cleaned him up, put gunk on him before I forgot to check the threads. The good news for you is I'm going to get to rectify that mistake because it don't fit. The bolts themselves we know will thread in. The problem is the bracket. You can see the cutout here, I guess for clearance on something. But the tabs underneath the bolt heads, which, just so you know I'm not lying to you, there's my beloved anti-seize. We're going to have to grind that radius area off, sort of like mirroring bolt hole, because we're not able to get the bracket to push in far enough with the head coming out so much farther towards the back. Firewall, transmission, whatever you need to think of it as. So we're going to have to grind away on that little bracket. So, unfortunate, but I'm so glad I decided to attempt. My first inclination is like, that's a sensitive electronic, put it in later. With the cowl coming over the engine, you're tempted to put it in now. At least by mocking this up, we find it. Again, this is something I've never seen anyone mention. And again, retrofit applications, you wouldn't have, a CPS back here to begin with. But if you're doing this in a Magnum, you're retaining factory fuel injection, whatever it may be, just a cylinder head upgrade because you're tired of, the cast iron ones going out, whatever, you will run into the same issue. So I'll try to get like a rough measurement there, and then always less is best. We want to retain as much as possible of the material on the bracket. So what I'll probably do is just start shaving a little bit and then kind of see what we've cut off and kind of ballpark that for you. So I'll also clean this one up, leaving the gunk on that one. I'll clean this one up, I'll measure the thread, make sure it is what I think it is, but I'm pretty sure I have a feel for it. Fighting off a sneeze, so I'm gonna go. Alright, not sure you can really tell, but the bracket was trimmed. I just took it to a bench grinder. That way I didn't have to fire up the air compressor. Basically, if you were to measure with a straight edge on the inside of this bracket coming forward towards the farthest most forward point, you're looking at like a little past 7/8 of an inch. It's between 7/8 and 15/16. So no real science involved. I just knew it needed to be smaller. Hit it on the bench grinder. One side looks really good, the other not so much because I don't have a stone on both sides. I've got a stone and a wire wheel. But basically 1/8 of an inch is what you need to shave off. Take it down to where when you put that ruler on the inside edge under here, kind of like right there where my finger's at, if that measures about 3/4 of an inch, it looks like it's going to fit. Now when I push that forward all the way, see that extra space? We were previously hitting the head. Now we can actually get it nestled up and have access to the threaded holes. In terms of the bolt, what we're going to have, if we could see it, let me try this for you. Good Lord. Well, you know what it looks like, right? There it is. So you're looking at a 5/16-18 by 3/4 inch with a flat washer. Again, 5/16 bolt, you need a 1/2 inch socket, but if you see in there, and from our Wera hex key, 1/4 inch hex, and that is very, very important. If you go out and you buy a 5/16 by 3/4 inch bolt, this isn't happening. You're not getting a socket in on that. You'd have to modify the bolt head and have like some stupid, 3-sided bolt that you'd still have issues with. So the socket cap, it doesn't necessarily have to have hex, if you go in and they don't have this specialty bolt, but they've got, a socket cap that would be rounded, that would probably work as well. But again, 5/16-18 by 3/4 inch. and you definitely want the provision to use a socket cap. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up. I believe 70 inch-pounds is what they want this tightened to. I may just go by hand, and I'm definitely leaving this in. And I can't tell you how happy I am that I went ahead and made myself put this on. Again, I was worried about it possibly getting damaged or breaking during the install. Had we have waited to do this, this would have been a royal pain in the butt to figure out with this in the truck. Again, if we had factory heads, you know, or a factory style head that didn't come out as far as these Eddies do, wouldn't have any issues with it. It's still a pain in the butt to get to, don't get me wrong, that's always going to be an issue, but you would not be prepared for the fact that you have to trim the bracket. So what that is, Edelbrock, you know, they maintain the factory provisions here for us, all the bolts and grounds and all that stuff, but just the distance that they extend past creates an issue there for your CPS. So if you're keeping the factory fuel injection, if you have to retain the crank position sensor, whatever your story may be prepared to slightly have to modify that bracket. And I do mean slightly, we're talking 1/8 of an inch should get you the clearance. So I'm going to tighten this down and we will be done with this.